Hi guys, I'm Claire and I'm going to be demonstrating the cell and contents of a cell, otherwise known as the organelles, using my lovely humidifier and the various organelles that I have laid out here, which I'll show you as I go through them. And then I'm going to put them on the humidifier as if they're kind of going into the cell within the cell membrane. So this is my cell, which has a cell membrane on the outside that encapsulates the cell and is a bilayer membrane, which I'll show you here, consists of hydrophilic heads and hydrophobic tails. And where the tails meet in the middle is going to be what separates this membrane into two layers. This is also where different molecules pass in and out of the cell. You can hear my dog in the background, but I'm going to keep going. And depending on the size of the molecule and the charge of the molecule, there are different proteins that live in this membrane that allow the transfer or exit and entry of the different molecules. Next, and we're going to think of this as the brain. It's going to be in the middle of the cell. It is the nucleus. And inside the nucleus is the nucleolus, and that's where ribosomes are made. And they go from the nucleolus, pass through the nuclear envelope, which encapsulates the nucleus. And that's going to go into our cell. The ribosomes will float freely throughout the cytosol, or the fluid in the cell, but they're also going to be found on the rough ER. Our endoplasmic reticulum, and it consists of two types of channels, or cisternae. One of them is going to be the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and one of them is the soft. So here you can see those little ribosomes, which make the protein and the peptides found within the cell. And here I have a little smiley face with glasses, which basically just means that it also is going to read and interpret the genetic makeup of the cell. This is the soft ER, and that's going to be responsible for detoxifying the cytosol and the interior of the cell. And we're going to put that right by the nucleus. Next, we have the lysosomes, which have my little teeth here. They're little hollow bubbles found throughout the cytosol of the cell. And they're going to come from the Golgi complex, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they contain digestive enzymes, which break down unwanted materials inside the cell. So here's that Golgi complex, which includes stacks of cisternae. And it basically is the I thought this was a good analogy, but like the packing and shipping of the cell, and it's going to finalize the protein production and synthesize carbohydrates, which go into the Golgi vesicles and ultimately into the cytoplasm. And we're going to put that right by the lysosomes because the lysosomes come from the Golgi complex. Here we have our mitochondria, which another great analogy I thought was kind of calling this the powerhouse of the cell. Depending on the energy makeup of the cell, there's going to be more or less of these because they have to do with energy inside the cell. So it synthesizes what's called ATP and turns that into energy for the cell. This one also has two layers, so it's a bilayer membrane around the mitochondria. These are my little peroxisomes, similar to lysosomes, but not. These come from the endoplasmic reticulum, and they detoxify the cell, not using enzymes, but using hydrogen peroxide, hence the peroxisomes. So we're going to put this right by the ER. And again, these are all my organelles inside my cytosol, or the fluid inside the cell. And all of that is going to be within the cytoplasm, or the interior of the cell, encapsulated by the cell membrane. And last but not least, these are the centrioles, which consist of microtubules that transport protein. And another function of these guys is that they ensure the cell divides properly and that all of the components of the cell are moved and arranged accordingly during the cell division process. And here's kind of a close-up of my cell. And I didn't want to put them in the humidifier because there's water in there. And so just pretend they're in the humidifier for the purposes of inside the cell. And then here I have the cytoskeleton. So we're going to put this inside the cell. That's going to be vessels, I suppose, of protein kind of throughout the cell, which give it more structure. And this is our cytosol, which I'm just going to pour right into here. And you can see all of our organelles floating inside our cytosol, inside the cell.